This episode of EMS One-Stop is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com, that's lexipol.com. Hello and welcome back to another edition of EMS One-Stop. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence, and we're now in a new era of podcast delivery because not only can you hear us on the platform of your choice, but also you can see us, and we are available on YouTube. And the difference being is that for the video portion of the show, if you're watching, we actually have some graphics and some visuals that you can watch and look at as well. But to get us into the show, today we're going to talk about wellness and how one particular medic went on literally a journey to help her mental health. And I think it's one that we all need to listen to, because having read her story and having chatted to her before we started recording, I think there's many lessons that we can take from my guest to apply to our job. And this is not only for the guys on the truck, but also you in the corner office, because there's some lessons to take away here. And so I'd like to introduce my guest for today, Amanda King. Amanda, welcome.
Hi.
Hi. And you are down at New Hanover EMS in Wilmington, North Carolina. And we have many friends down there. And so hello to all my friends and our friends in North Carolina in Wilmington, and at Novant Health as well. Let's do a bit of name dropping. And your story, which intrigued me, and as listeners know, I'm an avid hiker. I'm never at home on a weekend. I'm always out on a hill somewhere. And I've often said that if I dropped the lottery or somebody gave me 6 months off, I'd go and do one of the major trails in the United States, the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, to name but two. And I live on the West Coast, so it's got to be the PCT. But Amanda, you went off and walked the Appalachian Trail, which is no mean feat, and we'll talk about how long it is and how long it takes in a second. But going back to the beginning, obviously you're a medic, and you had that thing that we're seeing a lot now. Of course, medics are getting burnt out and need to just find a way to refresh and to reset. So start us off with your backstory. What's your history in EMS?
I got into EMS in 2012. I went to paramedic school, I think I finished in 2014. And then I started working for a local government agency. And then I think it's hard to remember exactly when, but I want to say it was about at the 8-year mark of being in EMS. I knew something was something was wrong. And so instead of dealing with it then, my answer to it, as many people, have the same answer, which is incorrect, is to add more work and stay busy and not think about it.
Right.
And so I kind of buried it. And then I believe it was September or October of 21. That was when I knew something, like I had to do something different.
So, how did you know? And obviously, as a working paramedic, we've all, experienced the stresses and strains of life, the highs and, the extreme highs, but also the extreme lows. How did you know when enough was enough?
For me, it hit me like a sack of bricks. When I woke up the morning that I resigned, I did not know that I was resigning.
Wow.
To put it that way. So it was a simple meeting that I was in, and I was doing a lot of work that was not part of my job description. It was just additional work that I was, helping out with. And so I woke up that morning, I went to this meeting, and then about an hour into it, I just, I looked up at one of my bosses and I said, I'm done. I am absolutely done. And there was no like talking me out of it. I don't want to say there's nothing anyone could have said to change my mind, but in that moment, it was just like I was telling myself, Amanda, if you don't do something different, something's
It's
not going to go well. Like, you've got to get out.
Right. And you don't have to answer this, and we can edit it out afterwards. But obviously, must have been a succession of issues that brought you to that point.
Oh, for sure.
Of exit, and
Yeah, sure.
if you could categorize those, what would they be?
Well, I just posted on my Facebook this picture from I believe it's the National Firefighters Association, or I forget what their actual organization name is, and it's like a progression in columns of symptoms of burnout, basically. And so by the time that I realized it, I was already in the red on the far end of the spectrum. There's nowhere else to go on the spectrum. So I think I recognized it late, which is kind of embarrassing because I'm a paramedic, and we hear about these things ever since paramedics.
I have to say, on behalf of the EMS industry, we are the worst patients ever.
Yeah.
And our ability to self-diagnose is good. Our ability to accept what we realize is bad
and do something about it, it's even worse.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So I was already in the red. And so I'll put it to you this way. I wasn't sleeping. And when I was sleeping, I was having nightmares bad enough to wake me up crying. I wasn't eating. I had no motivation to do anything. I was showing up late for work, which was completely out of character. I was calling out of work, which was also out of character. There was a lot, like, you name the symptom and I had it 100%. And so I think all of that combined into this particular day at this particular meeting that I talked about, it was just like literally someone came down with a flashing red light, and it was like all of this information, all of these symptoms, all of the factors hit me all at once. And it wasn't until that moment when I realized, like, you're done. This is it. Something's got to change. And it wasn't a gradual progression that I knew about, that I was aware of. It was gradual, but I wasn't aware of it until that moment. And then I was just like, yeah, I'm out. I'm out.
So, that day happened. You realized you were going to resign. You went. What do you feel like on the next day?
Relief. There was a whirlwind of emotions. I don't want to make it sound simple. I don't want to make it sound like overnight. And of
course, I think we know now it isn't, of course.
Right. I don't want to make it sound like overnight all my problems are solved as a result of this resignation letter. That's not how it happened. In the meeting, I decided I'm resigning. I looked up at my boss and I said, I'm done. I don't think he believed me. I think he thought I was kidding, because I was that employee. I was the employee that, a lot of my bosses relied on, and I got things done. And I don't think it was until I printed my resignation letter in front of him that I had written 6 months prior and took it to my other boss's office until he was like, oh, you're not kidding. Right. And so, I don't know. That's just how it happened.
Yeah. So, spoiler alert for everybody listening. Of course, we know that Amanda is back in EMS and she's working in Wilmington, New Hanover. So there's a gap we have to fill in here. And as I said at the start, you went on a journey. And so, the Appalachian Trail is a couple of thousand miles long. It takes months to complete. So why did you start by? Why did you do that? And how long after you resigned did you, literally start planning and then taking the journey?
Short answer, I don't remember. But I do know that my resignation letter, as I said, was typed, at least 6-8 months before I actually turned it in. So somewhere between having that letter and then actually submitting it, I had already started planning. It was just I'll plan this and just see how things go at work, because I had asked for help at work a couple times, and nothing really changed. And so I think once I realized that nothing was going to change and nothing was probably ever going to change as long as I was there, I had given up on that situation. So I would say about maybe 6 months. I resigned in November and I took off in February. So 4 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, I'd already started planning before then. I started planning before I resigned.
So
I just didn't tell anyone because I didn't know it was going to happen, obviously.
I'm a hiker geek, but tell everybody what the Appalachian Trail is and what it takes to actually just get to the start point.
Okay, so it did not come without sacrifice. And I want to make that clear, because a lot of people think that, just because I'm young and single and I don't have any children that, oh, I can just take off and do this, but that's not at all accurate. So I had to sell my house. I owned my house. I had bought it when I was about, I don't know, 25, 26. I sold it, everything in it that I did not want. I either gave away or sold. And then the remaining, like the furniture, I put in a storage unit. And then finances. So, it was the perfect time to sell my house, obviously, with the housing market the way it was. I lived in Calabash, North Carolina, pretty close to the water. And so I did profit off of selling my house. I paid off my truck, which was the only debt that I had. And I am a firm believer in not having any debt. And people always say, well, you don't have any kids, you don't have to worry about debt. Well, again, sacrifice. Like, I make a lot of choices financially that keep me out of debt that anybody can do.
And I think there's probably a whole podcast in that one too, because
right. So
the young and the single sometimes now have to have all the smart, shiny, fancy stuff with perhaps without the income to support it. And so maybe we can come back on that one for another day. Perhaps.
Yeah, I love talking about finances. But anyway, so when I sold my house, I paid off my truck. I'm debt free, right? So my plan was to keep enough money to pay for my grad school tuition, and again, stay out of debt and pay cash for it. And then the rest was like, I'm going on a 6-month vacation.
But and I know there are vacations, and then there's this vacation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got in a position now where you can start walking, and but tell us, I mean, how long is the trail? How long does it usually take? What are the sort of what is the logistics just to get something like this done?
So I had started hiking with a good friend of mine, Caretaker, and that's his trail name. And so we had started hiking. He took me along with him in 2018 on some section hikes. So that's how I got started in hiking. I had done about 250 miles total of various section hikes, ranging from Georgia to Northern Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland were the areas that I'd hiked. A little bit of Pennsylvania. And so I had kind of known what I was getting. I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, but I knew physically. I didn't know mentally. Two separate things when you're through hiking, the physical and the mental. So the Appalachian Trail is last year it was 2,194 miles, I believe. It's a little bit longer this year. They change it every year. And it goes from Georgia all the way up to Maine. And so all the preparation work and everything came obviously before I was dropped off in Georgia with just me and my backpack and my dad dropping me off and by myself. So
it's 2,000 and some miles, but it's not flat. And so how much height do you actually gain over that time? And therefore, how much height do you lose over that time?
They say it's the equivalent of hiking up Mount Everest 14 times. The highest peak is, I think, Clingman's Dome in the North Carolina, Tennessee area in the Smokies. And it's 6,300 feet. Compared to the PCT, it's really not that much, right? But the lowest point on the AT, I think, is 200 feet above sea level. and I'm used to living at sea level. So it was a huge adjustment. And then there's some areas that literally go straight up and you're hand over foot climbing. And then there's some areas where you're just walking on the road. So
no mean feat. And so you start off, your house is now on your back, and you have to worry about how much you're hauling, because for 2,000 miles, it's going to be unforgiving. And so, you know, what's in your back? What's in your pack? What are you carrying with you?
So I carried a tent, a sleeping pad, a sleeping bag liner, a pair of sleeping clothes, a pair of hiking clothes, a rain jacket, a puffy jacket, 3 pairs of socks total, including the ones I was wearing, a pair of camp shoes, which were Crocs, I admit, food, a water filter, a headlamp, a charging bank for my phone, headphones, a journal, a knife, and a cooking pot.
So if you're listening out there, could you spend months living with that? You know, if you're a military guy, you probably go, oh yeah, been there, done that. But so that's it. And maybe we can talk about the journal in a minute. But before we do, just remember that if you like what you hear and even what you see, please take a moment to like and subscribe on the channel that you're watching to us on. If you are on Apple Podcasts, at the top right-hand corner, there's a little plus sign. If you check that plus sign, it means you're subscribing. And so every time we have an edition of EMS One-Stop come along, it will notify you that we're here on your airwaves. So please do that, and rate and review us on the platform that you're listening to us on, please. I'm here with Amanda King. We're talking about her journey, both probably spiritual, definitely physically. And so you arrived on the Appalachian Trail, you've started hiking, we've established the kit and equipment that you went through. You're there because you're very burnt out. So in addition to the distance, how did this aid, you know, you and recovering and recharging and regenerating?
That's a loaded question.
We only do loaded questions. Actually, I said this last week as well. Well, oh, there's a loaded question. Yeah, because obviously what we want to do is to explore your journey and understand, you know, what it meant to you.
I think that, you know, when you walk over 2,000 miles over a span of 7 months, there's a lot going on, like, in your mind, obviously, because, you know, even when you're listening to music, you know, you're thinking. That's really all you have. And actually, I would argue that that's why a lot of people quit their through hike, is because they can't handle the mental side of it.
Right.
You know, some people quit because they run out of money. Some people quit because they're injured. A lot of people quit because of the mental aspects of it. So I would do little things here and there to try to occupy my mind. I would picture the drug box on the ambulance, and I'd go through my drug dosages and things like that. I'd try to count the alphabet backwards. I got to like W a couple times and gave up on that. But yeah, so I would think about things that I hadn't thought about in 20, 25 years. And it would hit me, and I'd be like, wow, where did that come from? And you have to be prepared for that. And it's just you in the woods. You know, most of the time I hike by myself. And so occasionally some things would come up in my mind that I hadn't really had time to process. And it would be like, oh, we're doing this today. We're processing this today. Right. An example I can think of would be, well, there's two. My dog dying. So my dog died in, I think, 2018, and I went to work the next day pretending like nothing was happening. And I'd had my dog since I was 18 years old. So that hit me pretty rough, but I tried to ignore it and just tried to go on about my way or whatever. And so when I was in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire, it hit me, and I cried for 2 hours probably. And that's just, that's just one example of, kind of burying all those things, and then, they coming out when you least expect them.
And actually, it's the second time I think you referred to this, but the bottling up, the going to work the next day as if nothing's happening. It's all storing up in your stress database that eventually leads you to a point where you can't cope, where you did the thing for you, which was to resign. Some others get to the point where it all ends literally. And so there's perhaps a takeaway there that if you have these thoughts and you're storing this up, you need to find a way to release it and to tell somebody to get assistance, and it's okay to ask for help. I mean, that's the key that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I don't.
Sorry, do go on.
I don't want to make it sound like it was 100% work that was the mitigating factor in my resignation. I think that there were, because I was so busy at work and stressed out and burned out because of the job, because of all those things, a lot of these other things started to surface that I had buried long before I got into EMS. And that's not, anyone's fault. Yeah. That's not employer's fault or the job's fault. That's just life, And so I think once I got to that point where I realized something was wrong, it was time to fix it and, come to face with it. I think a lot of things happen in life where we put them in a file, we label the file, do not open, and we put it in a file cabinet in our minds. Yep. Right. And so I think, we don't know when exactly our mind's going to say, no, today's the day you're opening that file. And so
that's a remarkable comment. So we're on the trail now. There are people that are there to help you along the way, and sometimes you don't expect them. And these people, for those that aren't in the lingo, are trail angels. And what's a trail angel? What do they do?
A trail angel is someone who comes out to the trail. They don't even really have to come out to the trail, but they help hikers, most of the time through hikers, just out of the goodness of their heart. They don't ask for anything in return. They don't ask for money or anything like that. They just do it just to help you succeed and get from point A to point B.
And so that they will come out, provide, and I've seen them on the Pacific Crest Trail. They'll come out and set up a hot dog cookout for people coming through, or leave bottles of water or extra fruit or something. And so and they really help you along. And I think the reason for asking this question, of course, is if you're in the corner office or you're in the soups truck now, think about being the trail angel. Think about how you can help your crews. You had some notable and memorable ones though, right, Amanda?
I did. Yeah, I had trail angels all up and down the AT from Georgia all the way to Maine. Some would offer coffee, some trash bags, which sounds simple, but it's great to get rid of your trash after being out there for a few days. Some would offer rides to town. Someone offer their living rooms for us, so we could sleep indoors. All kinds of offerings that they would give us. And then I had people from home that would send me iced coffee and Gatorade packets and Propel packets and stuff like that. So that was awesome too. But there were two trail angels in particular that I came across in Maine. One of them, her trail name was Monarch, and I met her in Georgia, where she was doing trail magic in Georgia, and I'd started before her.
Oh, stop you there. So we've had trail angels, and now we've got trail magic. What's trail magic?
Oh, so trail magic is the product of a trail angel. So the trail magic is the object that they're giving you. So if a trail angel offers their living room, their trail magic is the living room. And so with Monarch, she was at a trailhead in Georgia giving trail magic, which at the time was like biscuits and coffee and stuff like that. And then she was starting her through hike a month later, I think, something like that. So anyway, I saw her again in Maine, 14 states later, and she saw on my Facebook post where I had both a sinus infection and an injured tailbone because I fell on my butt.
Oof.
Yeah, in Mahoosic Notch, which is the most difficult mile of the entire AT. And so she saw my Facebook post and she sent me a message and she said, I'm on my way. And there was no arguing from me. She literally met me at the trailhead the next day, picked me up, took me to a cabin, and then did what we call slack pack me for I think 2 or 3 days, which is slack packing is when you hike without all of your weight. You only take what you need for that day. And on an injured tailbone, that's exactly what I needed to complete my hike.
Wow. So translating, supervisors, leaders, you're the angels. What magic are you delivering today to the folks on the ground? Think about that one. That's a takeaway, right? So that we want to pass that one on. Let's talk about trail names. In EMS, everyone gets a nickname, right? There are your trail names are given to you by other people based on something that you do or something they observe. So what was your trail name? Go on. There's only the two of us on here.
So my trail name was Moss, Moss, and
how'd you get it?
Accumulated my trail name or acquired my trail name in the most traditional way possible. So me and 2 girls were hiking together in Georgia. This is day 2 of my through hike. I started on the 23rd of February. This is February 25th, right? So I tell the girls, I'm like, I really have to pee, but we're on a switchback. So when you're female and on a switchback, there's really no good place to go. So I went ahead of the trail and I got behind a tree on the side of the mountain, and I pulled my britches down, and then I peed, and then I pulled my britches back up. And when I pulled my britches back up, something was not right. I didn't know what it was, but there was a feeling in my pants that should not have been there. So I walked back to the girls, and with a dead straight, like, traumatized face, I said, I'm pretty sure there's moss in my hoo-ha.
In your britches.
Yeah. And so you edit out what you need to, but they wouldn't.
Oh no,
there'll
be no editing in this one. This is one for everybody.
They wouldn't stop laughing. And so once they did stop laughing, they said, well, that's your trail name. And I said, hoo-ha? And they're like, no, Moss.
There we go. Moss. So from now on, shall we call you Amanda or call you Moss? What do you want to be addressed as?
Either one. I answered either one.
Thank you for telling us that and for sharing that intimate detail. This is an EMS medical show. We can cope with that, right? So we talked about trail angels, and you said you kept a journal. What were you journaling?
Most of the time it was just simple. It was my beginning mileage of the day, my ending mileage of the day, the campsites and or shelters that I was camping at, and then little things here and there that would happen on the trail that I wanted to remember. And then occasionally it was just writing about the events that transpired to get me to where I was. So in the beginning, I told you I didn't think that there was anything that anyone could have said to change my mind. And I think that's 90% true. But, at the time that I resigned, it was not well received. So I think as an employer, if I was someone's employer, right, and they came to me in the situation that I was in and in the same circumstances and explained what I explained, I think I would have handled it differently. But hindsight's always 2022, right? So or 2020. So I think in my case, my employer was very reliant on me. And I think that when I resigned, it was a shock to them. Right. So I think that part of my grief and part of my handling my emotions while I was out there was dealing with not only how that resignation was received, but how I was treated afterwards, and fear of how I would be treated in the future. And I, maybe that's why I went to work for a different service. I don't know. But I think a lot of it was fear. Now, was most of it brought upon myself? Did I do that? Absolutely. 100%. But I think when I carried a journal, I like to write anyways. I'm an English major, so that's just what I do. And so,
right. I'm glad you said that, because of course,
yeah.
EMS One are always looking for writers. Not only you, Amanda, but if you're out there and you have an article in you, get in touch, reach out to us, because we'd love to.
That's cool.
To publish, yes, of course. That's what we're here
for. So yeah, I carried a journal, and a lot. I wrote, about hiking, but I also wrote about my way of dealing with how things got to where I was.
So did that help you reflect, both when you were
Absolutely
writing and also now?
So I think, speaking of the word reflect, I think that part of my hike, that's me finally self-reflecting, is one of the key takeaways, because not only was I able to realize what in that process of resignation was my fault, how I went about that. I did give a 4-week notice, but at the same time, there are things that I wish I would have done differently. And I think that there are things up until that process of me resigning altogether that I should have done differently. Would I have had the time to stop and think, Amanda, what could you do better if I had not have resigned? I don't think so. I don't think I would have ever had that time. I don't think I ever would have done that. I don't even know that I knew what self-reflection was until I got on the Appalachian Trail and had time to actually think about, well, okay, you're blaming all these people for all of this, but what did you do wrong? What could you have done better? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that's something that I took away, that, to this day, every time something happens that, is not ideal, I think to myself, okay, what was your part in this, Amanda? What was your role in this? What would you have done differently? It's huge. It's a big deal.
That's sound advice as well. We're actually blocking up some amazing takeaways here. Taking a break actually is another part of your trail experience, and again, for those that are in with the sort of lingo, you'll walk for so often and then you need to stop, and it's called taking a zero. And how did you achieve that? What did you do on the days where you weren't walking?
I love zeros.
I think we all love zeros. It's fair to say.
That's what took me 7.5 months compared to the average of 6, because I'm really good at zeroing. And when I was really good at something, why would I not want to do it?
Right.
So I will say that, should say this, but I guess you can take it out if you need to. But I went to 13 breweries along the trail. Actually,
this is EMS only 13?
Yes.
Okay.
I just have a taste for craft beer. I can't help it. So 13 different breweries, and every time we'd come across one that we had heard good things about, we'd purposefully plan our zeros around that, and then chances are we'd need the next day as a zero as well. And so in addition to breweries,
well, what? Failing to plan is planning to fail. So good for you.
Exactly. And that was like the only thing we planned.
No, come on. You walked thousands of miles. There's a bit more planning, but do go on.
I really didn't want to. That was like the whole purpose. At home and at work, I was living by a deadline. That I was huge advocate for deadlines, because that's how I got things done. And then when I got out there, I was like, yeah, I don't care. I got food in my backpack. We're just gonna wing it. Like, that's just how I did things a lot of the times, and it almost always worked out every time. And most of the time on the trail, it works out better than you think it's going to work out.
And that zero left you possibly hungover, but certainly refreshed, right?
Yeah. So the hangover thing only happened like twice, to be fair.
Good.
Yeah. But we did town chores.
Yeah.
So we go in, we do our laundry, we'd wash our clothes, we'd shower, we get some actual food involving meat. We couldn't get a whole lot of meat while we were out on trail
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. And then we clean our equipment, dry our tents out if they were wet.
Yeah.
Just the typical town chores. Shave my
Yeah.
legs. That was a
Right.
must.
Now, for those naysayers, and go, oh yeah, but she could take 6 months off to do this. Of course, what I want to do is say that every circumstance is different, but to translate a zero back to if you're in a work-life balance, the zero is when you're not on shift. So, what would you suggest to people that when they finish their shift and they have a couple of days off, what's the best way to spend it?
I think my biggest regret is this very simple word. It's 2 letters long, and it's the word no. Don't be afraid to say no. Like, take time for yourself, because you are the most important person. If you're not happy and if you're not safe, then, how can you expect to keep other people happy and safe? So, I think that's the biggest thing is, don't work so much overtime. Don't inconvenience yourself to do all of these things that's asked of you, and in return you're not taking care of yourself. So one thing that I decided if I got back into EMS is I would actually use my vacation time. So I'll put it to you this way: when I was at the former employer, I took a vacation probably, I don't know, just to throw a number out there, maybe twice in 6 years or something like that, like an actual vacation. And I've already taken 2-week-long vacations since I started here at Novant, since November. So that's a huge difference, right? And so my advice would be to say no if you don't really want to, if you don't have the energy, if you need sleep, if you need a break, whatever. Just don't be afraid to stand up for yourself and say no. And then to take your PDO when you can. Like, you don't have to go on some elaborate vacation or cruise or whatever in order to use your vacation days. Sometimes just rest is exactly what the body needs.
Great. Those are amazing words. And again, I knew this was going to be chock full of takeaways, not only from your experience can actually be translated into life. Now, hopefully we're going to talk about elation next, because there comes a point where you finish the trail. What was that day like for you?
So I like hiking alone. I did it. I hiked majority of the trail alone by choice because I like being by myself. And when I got to the end, I had been hiking with 3 other people, I think, for the days leading up to the final summit. And we got lost the night before. Like, I got separated from them somehow the night before. I had slower than all 3 of them. So I took off from the spot we were taking a break at before they did, so that they wouldn't have to wait on me. I ended up at the campsite and they didn't.
Oh boy.
Yeah, which surprised me because in Baxter State Park, you're not allowed to camp unless you're at a designated campsite. So my prediction is that they did what we call stealth camp, and they did a really good job because I didn't know where they were. So the day that I summited the final mountain, I was by myself, which, it was basically poetry because I started the first mile of the Appalachian Trail by myself. So it would make sense that I finished by myself. And so it was probably 30, 40 degrees that day. It was windy. Mount Katahdin is an animal of a mountain. I mean, it's over 6,000 feet tall. It's completely exposed terrain once you break the tree line. And, we're talking several miles of hiking once you're above the tree line. So it was just, you're literally walking through the clouds. I think I sent you a video of that day. So anyway, once I got to the sign, I didn't cry. I didn't feel really any kind of emotion. It was just maybe numbness. Maybe it hadn't hit me yet. I'm not really sure. I FaceTimed my mom and my dad, and I let them see where I was, and I told them that I was finished, and My mom screamed. I called my best friend and she didn't answer, which is hilarious because that's just how we are. But I sent her a text, told her I'd finished. And then after that, it was so cold that I just started my way down. And then the climb down is almost as difficult as the climb up. And then once I got to the bottom, I found a tree. I laid out my foam mat and I laid under this tree, and it was just like, I did it. I can't believe I did it, but I did it.
Right. And then we have the what happens next, because you've done this, it's over, you have nothing but memories. And so at that point, was there a reflective moment of I needed that, and then you start thinking about, well, what do I do next? Was there a reflective period of at the conclusion of that?
I don't think so, to be honest. I really don't. I think I'm still sorting through that aspect of it. I knew that coming back into EMS, I was going to use these techniques that I learned on trail to help me assimilate back into EMS. I knew that the mental aspect of the trail was going to help me not only get back into EMS, but in life. And so I think I'm still trying to organize all of that in my mind. But it didn't, I'll be 100, if I'm being 100% honest, and this is probably going to surprise some people. It wasn't until, I believe his name is James Careless. He wrote the EMS World article about
James is a freelance writer, and we certainly worked with James before. And and actually, to give James some props, it was reading James's story that made me realize that, immediately, and again, because I guess I'm, that hill walker, there's so many takeaways from just James's story. So thank you, James, for writing that story, because I realized that can I say, Amanda, you need to be keynoting on this around the EMS world, actually, because the takeaways.
Really, that's a pretty powerful statement.
Folk, if you're listening and watching this, do you agree with me? I think there's an inspiration story here of the situation that led to you resigning, the life on the trail, some of the takeaways that I've just tried to sort of to bring out, and I think there's a story to be told here, and I really think you should be keynoting this.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate you having me here. I haven't thanked you yet, and I apologize.
No, none needed. It's a great story.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just get on to the sort of bring it to full circle. So back into EMS, and so how easy was that decision, or was it going to happen anyway?
Well, the reflection part of it, honest to God, I never connected the dots, and I know that sounds so silly, but like we said, I'd like to think of myself as a pretty intelligent person most of the time, right? I mean, I've got a sink in my bathroom that I don't really know how to fix, but eventually I'm going to figure it out, right? But I think that it wasn't until I read James's article where I was like, holy moly, he's right. He's right. Like his title of the article, I think it was something like Paramedic Conquers Burnout Through Hiking the Appalachian Trail. And then I took that sentence and I was like, conquers burnout. And I put that together, conquers burnout. And I'm like, is it true? Did I? You know what I mean?
Did you?
Like,
let's ask the question. Did you?
I think that I just think there's a lot going on in that question. I don't know. I don't want to say that I did and then go back to work and someone be like, absolutely not. She's awful to work with. But I do believe that I had I think it's an ongoing process. That's my answer. Okay, that's my answer. Short answer.
And it's allowed to be, by the way. I mean, it's not, this is
okay. that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to say yes, like a 7-month hike in the woods cured all my problems, because that's not at all the case. I think that it's an ongoing process that, once you reach that point of burnout, it's number one up to you. It's not up to anybody else to help you. It's up to you to help you. And you have to want that change. And I think that it's an everyday thing. Every day I need to do things that keep me on that path of not going back down that road again.
Right.
So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I'm sure folk listening can relate to that. And so now you're back in Wilmington. You're at Novant, New Hanover, and what are you doing there now? What are you a medic on the truck? What's your role?
Yeah, I'm a paramedic on the 911 ambulance. Absolutely.
And how has that experience helped you? What's if someone like me, and I'm about to ask this, what's the one biggest takeaway from your experience on the trail that you can apply when you start working a few hours on the next shift?
Way too many.
Okay, give me way too many. That's a good too.
Yeah, so there's too many. The ones that stick out the most to me, I would say, are patience. So that was something I did not possess before I resigned from my other job, and I think that was literally a symptom of the burnout where I was at. I had no patience whatsoever, and it showed to my partner. It showed to family members that I would encounter on a call. And I hate to admit all that. It's embarrassing, but that's where I was. That was the point where I was at. And so I think now, after all that time off and all that time to self-reflect and everything, I think I'm more patient because I believe that I'm more empathetic, which is also something that I can't say that I possessed before I left. Right up until the point where I left. So I think that hearing all of these different hikers' stories and hearing their backgrounds and their cultures and even their political views, all of these different things kind of opened my eyes to a world that, sure, you encounter people like this in EMS, but you're only with them for a very short amount of time. And so when you're on trail with them, no one's keeping a clock and telling you that you've got to go in a certain amount of time. So you have all the time in the world to talk to them if they have the time. And so I learned a lot about other people and other backgrounds and other cultures, and it made me more empathetic. And it made me understand that, and this is another key takeaway that I've literally just came across. Sometimes when things happen, like my resignation, for example, or anything, it's not just what's going on in that moment that matters. It's the baggage we bring to that moment. So me coming to my bosses and resigning, I had all of this baggage with me that they didn't know about. I didn't tell them. I didn't feel comfortable enough to tell them, and I should have. That was one of my regrets. And then they coming to my resignation with all of their baggage, like, what are we going to do? She does a lot for us, kind of thing. So I think that perception of that moment is different for each person in that moment. And that's just an example that could be applied to anyone in any situation. But the key takeaway is the empathy and the self-reflection out of that. So now, as a result of walking for a really long time, I'm able to see their side of things, whereas before I didn't. And then I'm also able to understand, okay, I was just as much at fault for allowing this burnout to happen. I'm guilty of that. And so now I'm able to make these adjustments to make sure that I don't get in that position again.
So I guess final question. So, you've literally, as I keep saying, you've been on this journey. If you see other folk with you at work now, heading towards what could be a breakdown, heading towards a crisis, what advice do you give them, or will you give them?
I would definitely say that, I know it's cliche, but they're not alone. I mean, this happens. It's very prominent in EMS and public safety in general, right? So I would definitely make sure they're aware that they are not alone in this. They're not the first person to go through this. They're not going to be the last person to go through this. And they definitely need to reach out and contact their organization's EAP if they have it, if that's an option. And even if not, then, hopefully they can get situated with some sort of therapist through their primary care physician. And, maybe that's an option. And I think therapy, although I don't see one, I think it's a very underutilized tool. I think that a lot of my patients, they've spoken very highly of it, and coworkers have spoken very highly of it. So that, and then also just taking the time off, just because you don't have anywhere to go doesn't mean you can't take the time off. Saying no, talking to family and friends, and just being aware of, I joked about beer earlier, but being aware of, how much you are, drinking and all those other hobbies that could lead to something bad or lead to a poor choice and all that. And so just being very, self-reflecting and making sure you're holding yourself accountable.
Wonderful. Well, Amanda King, or Moss, if I may. That was an amazing telling of your story, and honestly, I think we all need to hear you deliver this on stage, because there's so many great takeaways. And let's get Amanda speaking publicly. But how can we follow you? Is there a Facebook page or a YouTube channel we can catch all of your adventures on, or is that something we need to get you doing?
Not really. I'll be at the EMS World Conference in New Orleans presenting this topic. It's called Mindset Over Matter. And it's September 22nd at 1 p.m. at the conference.
Great. I'll be there too, so I'll get a chance to say hello.
Awesome. I hope I get to meet you.
Absolutely.
I do have an Instagram. It's called, the handle is A Hike of One's Own. AHIKEOFONESOWN, I think.
And well, we'll put that we'll put that in the show notes so people can follow you, like and subscribe, and keep up with you as well.
That sounds great. And I'm also on LinkedIn, so not necessarily YouTube or anything.
We'll follow you on LinkedIn too. So, Amanda, for the moment, thank you so much indeed. And I'm going to certainly be in the audience at EMS World Expo to listen and cheer you on.
Awesome. That sounds good. That's exciting.
Well, that's it for this EMS One-Stop. I've taken so much away from this discussion with Amanda. Don't forget, you can follow me on LinkedIn or over on Twitter at UKRobL1. Always active over there. But for the moment, my guest has been Amanda King. I've been Rob Lawrence. Don't forget, hit like and subscribe. And until next time, bye for now.